Hi, good morning everybody and welcome to session B. We're going to start off today, I suppose, on the multi-species sward side, and we're going to touch on some themes as well that we touched on yesterday, such as returning to field boundaries and margins, which are common aspects to both scorecards. So first off this morning, we're going to start with Tara and Multi-Species Ley, and then we have John Finn here, who's going to give us a research update in a little while as well. After the break, then we'll talk about specifications, complementary actions, and talk a little bit about inspections and management as well, and evaluation. So I'll hand over to Tara now to start with multi-species swards.
Thanks, Jerome. Okay, so multi-species leys, or calling them in REAP, but they're also referred to as herbal leys or multi-species swards elsewhere. MSL for short is what we refer to the scorecard in REAP. So how to choose a suitable field for this? It has to be an enclosed field where there's either an existing mixed species legume ley managed either for grazing or silage, it doesn't matter, or an enclosed ryegrass field where you wish to reseed. And rather than reseeding with your normal perennial ryegrass, that you would reseed with an MSL mix instead. So it's fields where there's any risk of soil erosion or runoff shouldn't be used, and it's important to choose fields that don't have a high burden of weeds or slugs. Clovers in particular grow less well in soil that is a pH less than 6 and that is below index 2 for phosphorus and potassium. So it's very important that fields that haven't been previously cultivated or semi-natural grassland or permanent pasture is used for the mixed species ley action. So the cultivation of semi-natural grassland or old permanent pasture is prohibited and will result in rejection from the project. So what do you have to do? What's the farmer have to do to establish a mixed sward of grasses, legumes and herbs? And there's a minimum of 3 legumes and herbs that should be included. For example, certified red clover, there's late flowering red clover, bird's foot trefoil, and samphoin chicory, sheep's parsley forage herb, yarrow, plantain, or burnet. And we're asking for a 2-meter gap, that's an uncultivated, unsprayed zone to be kept between the field boundary and the start of the reseed. So straight into using the scorecard in the field. This is very similar structure to the low input grassland scorecard, though it is a little bit shorter. There's only 7 questions on this card and there was 9 on the low input grassland. And there's only 3 questions that are specific to this card. There's questions 4, 5, 6 and 7 are also on the low input grassland scorecard. So before you attempt to answer question 1, the first thing to do in the field is to put in the date and your name and the farmer herd number and the field name or the field number. And as I said yesterday, it's a good idea to include a field name, whatever the farmer wants to call the field, so that if you're talking about it, if he's got a couple of these fields in, that if you're talking about it on the phone, that you'll both know which field you're referring to. So before you answer question 1, if you log on to the Agri Snap application on your phone and take a photo of the field. And again, this is a reminder how to take a correct photo of the field. It's showing approximately a quarter sky and taken from a central field position, or that a photo is representative across the general field area. Why are we asking for such a diverse mix? Well, in REAP, that we're wanting to provide extended supply of pollen and nectar from late spring through to the autumn for lots of insects such as bees, butterflies, hoverflies and moths. And the combination of a really diverse mix with lots of different growth habits can help improve soil structure and provide increased resilience against wet or dry conditions, increase organic matter and improve microbial activity. So this is just an example taken from Cotswold seeds, but the illustration in the middle is really nice, and I know the pictures are quite small, but Can you see perennial ryegrass there? It's the 1, 2, 3, 4th from the left. And if you see the rooting depth of that, and then you compare the rooting depth of that to some of the other species in the MSL mix, and you could see how much better they are for improving the soil structure and far greater rooting depths. Even cocksfoot, which is 3rd from the right, has quite a long rooting structure there. So this question 1 asks how many of sown legume and herbs are present. So as I've said, you need to have a minimum of 3. That's not 3 overall species. So if you had perennial ryegrass and cocksfoot and a clover, that's not counted. It has to be 3 sown legume and herbs. So a minimum of 3, and anything over 6 gets you full marks. So the list of species here, this isn't a complete list by any means. These are just some common plants that are often included in mixes that we've listed here: birdsfoot trefoil, red clover, white clover, outside clover, sweet clover, lucerne, sainfoin, chicory, burnet, ribwort plantain, yarrow, sheep's parsley. If there's other plants in the mix, you can list them there. There will be space for you in GLAMS to list that too. So what you do during the W walk of a field, to walk through the field to tick all sown legume and herb species present, and you can use your plant identification key book to help you. I'll show you that again in a minute. Not all plants will be in flower, so it's important to look for leaves as well as flowers. All of these species are in the plant identification key. Alternatively, if the field has been recently sown, such that all plants haven't grown up yet, they may have germinated, but they might be too small to be able to identify correctly, then it's fine to use a seed label to identify what has been sown there in the field this year. And what you would need to do is to submit through the Agri Snap application, scan a photo of the seed label. So this is an example of one that was bought this year. It's an 8 species mix with red clover, plantain, a couple of different chicories, white clover, yarrow, sheep's parsley, and burnet. So something like this would be fine to submit to the Agri Snap application for mixes that have been recently sown this year. In the plant identification key book, then, it starts with the positive indicators that we spoke about yesterday for the low input grassland field, and that's followed by negative indicators. And negative indicators are negative indicators on any scorecard. So there would be the pages that are red, lined red. There's not a huge amount of those. They're noxious weeds typically. And then there's the blue lined pages are the sown legumes and herbs. So what we have included is all of those that are listed on the scorecard. So here's an example page from the book for showing outside clover. It shows the month that it's in flower up at the top. It's a general growth habit, a close-up of the flower and a close-up of the leaf. Question 2, then, what is the vegetation structure in the field? So you would either mark poor, moderate, or good in this. So if it's poor, the lay will be of uniform height with very little variation. It could be completely eaten off or very few flowering plants visible. Moderate, there'll be some variation in structure, not overgrazed, and several flowering plants visible. And good, as we see there in the photo, with a diverse mix with a good variety of heights, taller, shorter, and intermediate, with many different flowering species. Now the next question is, this is the last question then that is specific to this card. So it shows this is a really simple assessment for the multi-species lays, but it's just very important that each step is carried out correctly. So we've also simplified this as much as we can for advisors and taken a lot of the work out of it, such that GLAMS is going to do a lot of this work for you. So what you do when you come to the field is you mark on your paper map that you've got with you. You would mark on that all fenced field margins present. So in yesterday in the low input grassland, you had a choice of putting in 1 metre margins, 2 metre margins, or 3 metre margins, or any combination of that in different boundaries in the field, but that each margin must extend along the full length of a field boundary. But in the MSL, you have an option to have a 5 metre margin as well. It's the same as the low input grassland card, in that there's additional marks awarded for any field with a field margin beside a watercourse. So that's a natural watercourse or a drainage ditch. A drainage ditch that holds water at some time during the year. But in this scenario, that there was 5 extra bonus marks for the low input grassland card. There is more marks going for the margins in this card than there is in the low input grassland card. So there's 10 bonus points that can be awarded for any field with a field margin on this card. I am going to go through this box with you a little bit down below, which shows the densities, field margins per hectare, but it's just for your information. You don't need to calculate this. What you need to do is you go into the field with a marker, draw on the field margins that are in place in the field, and then when you come back to your computer and you're digitizing it in GLAMS, you just draw in the margins in GLAMS on the computer. And then GLAMS does all this calculation for you of the densities per hectare and works out the score. So there's a slight disadvantage with it in that it's harder for you. Then you can still work it out, I'll show you how to work it out, but that it's not automatic for you to be able to know the exact score of the field there and then until you've put it through GLAMS. So the reason that we have the 5 metre margin is to encourage parts of the crop to flower to benefit pollinators. If it's restricted from grazing, there'll be a lot more in flower. So this is to show you then what we mean about how to put in the different margin widths in here, because it could be a bit confusing perhaps, because we've asked for a 2 metre unsown, uncultivated edge between the hedge and the start of the reseed. So in this diagram, we see the checkered on the outside is the hedge. Then the dark green inside that is the 2 metre uncultivated strip, and then the crop is inside that. So, and then your different margin widths then that you can choose. There's 1 metre, 2 metre, 3 metre, 5 metre, and the 1 metre in purple. So the 1 metre in purple is it's just part of the uncultivated margin. The 2 metre then would be at the edge of the uncultivated margin. If you were putting in a 3 metre margin, it includes 1 metre of the sown crop. And if you're putting in a 5 metre margin, well, that fenced margin includes the uncultivated bit at the edge plus 3 metres of the sown crop. And there's higher points and higher payments awarded accordingly. So to give you an example then of how that matrix works within GLAMS. So you can see in this field that there's 3 metres along, there's 3 margins along 3 of the boundaries in the field. So along the top of the field, you have a 1 metre margin, and the length of that is 240 metres. So the way that you get the density of that per hectare is divide 240 by 4.7, gives you 51 metres per hectare. And then the 3 metre margin lengths are 230 metres along one boundary and 250 along the other, gives 480 metres. So the density per hectare of the 3 metre margins is 480 divided by 4.7 is 102 metres. So your 1 metre margin density of 51 metre per hectare and your 3 metre margin density of 102 metres per hectare. So then GLAMS can see then that for your 1 metre margin, it comes into the first bracket densities per hectare of 50 to 200 metres per hectare. So for your 1 metre margin, you're getting a score of 5 for that. And for your 3 metre margins, your 2 3-metre margins, the density of those combined, you're getting a score of 30 for that. So in this field, you'll be getting 35 marks for this question. If there was a water course alongside any of those margins, you would be getting an extra 10 marks. So you'd be getting 45 for that question. The next thing to do is that is the next set of photos. So you've already taken a photo of the field as soon as you come into the field, and the next thing to do is to take 2 photos, one of each. Well, it's 2 photos in this situation because there is 2 different margin types. There's a 1 metre margin type and there's a 3 metre margin type. So there's no need to take a photo of one of each of the margins. So just one of the 3 metre margins is sufficient and one of the 1 metre margin. So the margin management is the same for both low input grassland and for the multi-species leys. They must be managed at least once a year by mowing or flailing or mulching, and it can only take place between the 1st of September and February the 28th. In low input grassland, the margins, we are suggesting and recommending that they are removed to help increase flower growth in the next season. But for the multi-species leys, we're saying that these must be removed because if we don't remove the arisings in these margins, the flowers will be quickly out-competed with grasses, and the extra nutrients from the cut grass that lies on top of them will only encourage more grass growth, and it'll smother out all of the flowers. And of course, the main reason for having the margins there is for flowers for pollinators. So it's important that those cuttings are removed in these margins. Fertilizer, lime or pesticides can't be used in them apart from the spot treatment of weeds. I've just put these, the last 4 questions in the scorecard just into the one box because I'm not going through them in any great detail just right now, and to show you that these are the same questions that are on the low input grassland scorecard. So the first is question 4, which is marking on field boundary features. That would be that's exactly the same as question 6 on the low input grassland scorecard, and we are going into detail in that in a presentation in a little while this morning. The next question, question 5, the combined cover of negative indicators or invasive species throughout the field margins and boundaries only. That is the same as question 7 on the low input grassland scorecard, and again we'll be going into that in a bit more detail in the boundaries presentation, which will be coming up in a little while. And the last 2 questions, question 6 and question 7, we went through those yesterday in the low input grassland scorecard. They're exactly the same as questions 8 and question 9 on the low input grassland scorecard. Management advice then, similar, that there is a space for management advice that you must tick at least one of these in the field and then onto glams for each field. And of course, the management advice here is specific to MSL. It's a little bit different from the low input grassland. Things like grazing the stock more regularly and controlling the spread of invasive species, or considering putting in a fenced field margin. Of course, the fenced field margins in either scorecard, MSL or low input grassland, are voluntary, but you won't receive a very high score, particularly in multi-species leys, without putting in margin. So that's it. Thank you.